Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over the January 2024 Algebra 1 Regents exam. We're going to be looking at part 1, which is multiple choice questions 1 through 24. For this test, you are required to have a graphing calculator. So when I'm going over this video, I'm going to be using a TI-84 plus CE, which is similar to the calculator you have on the test. We're going to be starting with number 1, which says that the graph below represents a dog walker's speed during his 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. Which statement best describes what the dog walker was doing during the first 12 to 18-minute interval of his walk? Okay, so this is going to be a graph. This graph represents the speed of someone walking over time, right? And they're asking you what happened between 12 to 18 minutes. So between 12 to 18 minutes, that's this interval from 12 to 18. So it starts at this point, ends at this point. And the best way that you could interpret this is just read the graph. What happens at these points? At the point 12, or at 12 minutes, his speed is what? His speed is between 1 and 2, so 1.5. At 14 minutes, his speed is 1.5. On 16 minutes, it's 1.5. And on 18 minutes, it's also 1.5. So what I got from this is between the times 2 to 18 minutes, his speed was 1.5 miles per hour, meaning that it did not change. It's a flat line. It did not change. So if his speed didn't change, that means that he has to be walking at a constant rate. For his speed to decrease or increase, his speed has to actually change. It has to change from 1.5 to something else. Here, which is 1.5 straight out. And if he was standing still, that means his speed has to be 0 miles per hour, which is not the case here. So number 2 says, given the relation 0, 4, 2, 6, 4, 8, x 7, what value of x will make this relation a function? Right, so the Regents likes to ask these questions where they ask you what makes this a function, what makes that a function. How the Regents looks at a function is the following. It looks at a function as a relationship where every x input has one and only one y output. Right? So you can't have multiple y outputs at one x input. So for example, if you have the point 0, 4 and 0, 7, this is not a function because when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 4 and 7. When x is equal to a number, y has to, there can only be one instance of y for that number. And if you look at it on a graph, it looks something like this, right? Let's look at this graph, for example. This is 1, 2, and 3, and this is 1, 2, and 3. Let's say you have the point 1, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 2, and 3, 3, right? Let's say you have these points. So far, this is a function because every x input, which are down here, has only one y output. So at every x, there's only one point. But let's say that you also had the value or the point 1, 2. If you had the point 1, 2, this is no longer a function because at one x input, you have two outputs, right? And this fails the vertical line test because you can draw a vertical line through 2 points, right? So at every x, you need to have one point only. So knowing that, numbers 1, 2, and 4 can't be correct because that just defeats what we just did. If you have, if x is equal to 0, that means that when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 4 and 7. And we just said that it could only equal to one number. If you have x equals 2, that means that at x equals 2, y is equal to 6 and 7, right? So there's 2 points at one x input. Same thing with 4. 6 is the right answer because there's no other instance of 6 comma a number, right? This is the first time you have 6 comma a number, which means that so far every single x input has one unique y output, and you don't have 2 points stacked on one another. Number 3 says the Speedy Jet Ski Rental Company charges an insurance fee and an hourly rental rate. The cost is modeled by the function r of x is equal to 30 plus 40x. Based on this model, which of the statements is true? So when you have when you have a fee, you're looking at a constant. And when you have an hourly rental rate, or if you have just a rate, this is going to be the thing multiplied by x. That's just how linear functions are. When you have a fee, it's constant, meaning that there's no x attached. And when you have a rate, that means that it's being multiplied by x. So an example, the function r of x is equal to 30 plus 40x. This is going to be your fee, right? Because there's no x attached. And this 40 is going to be the rate because there is an x attached, right? So based on this model, which of the statements is true, number 1 has to be true because r of x represents the total of cost. It just said that. The total cost is modeled by the function r of x, right? 2 says x is the number of hours rented. This is also true. X is often time. X often represents time, so that's true in this case. Now, number 3 and 4 are wrong because we just said that the rate is 40 and the fee is 30. This says that 40 is the fee, which is false, and 30 is the rate, which is also false, right? So just remember that a fee has no x attached and a rate has x attached, right? Because think about it. If this is dollars per hour and x is your hours, if you multiply this by x amount of hours, the hours cancel out and you're just left with x amount of dollars, which makes sense, right? So choices 1 and 2 have to be your answers for that reason, right? The fee is the thing without the x, and the rate is always going to be the number with the x attached. So number 4 says the 11th sequence of the term 3, -6, 12, -24 is what? So the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out if this is an algebraic or geometric sequence. And the way you find that out is the common ratio, or R, right? So the common ratio is just the number that you have to add or multiply to get the next term. Here we can see that this is going to be a geometric sequence, because in order to get from one number to the next, you need to multiply by -2, right? To get from 3 to -6, you multiply -2, -6 to 12, you multiply by -2, 12 to -24 by -2. So now we just need to remember the geometric sequence formula, which is going to be the following. Geometric sequence gives you the nth term by plugging in a of 1 times r, which is your common ratio, to the power of n minus 1. Here, n is going to represent the term you want to solve for, right? R is the ratio. That's it, right? So how do you find R? R is equal to a of 2 over a of 1. And here we just said that n is the term that you want, right? Whenever you have a of 1 or a of a number, that just means this is the number in this sequence, right? So for example, a of 1 is going to be the first number, or 3. A of 2 is going to be -6. A of 3 is going to be 12. A of 4 is going to be -24, right? So a sub a number, or a with a small number written underneath it, just represents the position of that number in the sequence. So a of 2 is the second number in the sequence, which is -6. -6 divided by a of 1, which is the first number in the sequence, is 3. -6 divided by 3 is -2. So we know that our r is equal to -2. Now we can plug that in. A of n, here we're solving for the 11th term, right? N is the term you want to solve for. So we plug in 11 for n. We know that n is equal to 11. A of 11 is equal to a of 1, which is the first term, 3, times -2, which is our ratio, to the power of 11 minus 1, which is 10. And we can just plug this into our calculator that we're allowed to use. So 3 times -2 to the power of 10 is equal to 3072, which is choice 3. Okay, which situation represents exponential growth? When you have exponential growth, that means that you increase at a non-constant rate. So every increase in x, you increase by a different amount each time. And I could represent that on a graph. For example, x squared is an exponential function, right? You can see it curves upwards. Why does it curve upward? Because you increase by a greater amount every single time. For example, when you go from the point 0 to 1, you increase by 1. But then when you go from 1 to 4, right, you increase by 3. Then from 2 to 3, you go from 4 to 9, which you increase by 5. Then to 9 to 16, you increase by 7. 16 to 25, you increase by 9, right? So every single value, y value, the next y value, is going to be increased by a greater number. Now, a linear function or a non-exponential function, such as 2x, is going to look like this. This red function right here. Every single increase is increased by the same amount, right? So 0 to 2 is 2, 2 to 4 is 2, 4 to 6 is 2. You're going to increase by 2 forever. Here, you increase by a different number every single time. So we're going to choose the scenario where we increase by a different number every time. So if you add $10 to a jar each week, you're increasing by the same number every single time. You're increasing by 10 every week, same number. Number 2 says a pine tree grows 1.5 feet per year. Here, you're increasing by the same number every single time, every single year. 3 says Ella earns $20 per hour babysitting. This is also false because you earn $20 every single hour, every single time. So 4 has to be the right answer because of the process of elimination, but also the number of people majoring in computer science doubles every 5 years. This doubles every X years, is a pretty big indicator that something is exponential, and I could show it for you. Say in the first year, or at 0 years, you start off with 5 people, right? Then 5 years pass, and now this number doubles to 10. 5 times 2 is 10. Then 5 more years pass. Now this number doubles to 20. Then 5 more years pass, and this number doubles to 40. Every 5 years, you increase by 5. Then the next 5 years, you increase by 10. Then you increase by 20. So every 5 years, you're increasing by a different amount, which makes this exponential. The expression, moving on to number 6, it says the expression negative x squared plus 3x minus 7 minus 4x squared plus 5x minus 2 is equivalent to what? Now, the first thing you need to do here is to get each term out of the parentheses. And you can get this term out of the parentheses, right? You can get negative x squared plus 3x minus 7 out of the parentheses. But here, you cannot get 4x squared plus 5x minus 2 out of the parentheses unless you multiply it by negative 1. Remember that when you have a negative symbol in front of a parentheses, that means that there's an invisible negative 1 in front of it, which means you need to multiply everything inside of it by negative 1. Cool. That's just a rule. You have to remember that, right? So negative 1 times 4x squared is negative 4x squared. Negative 1 times 5x is negative 5x, and negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. So now, let's just combine like terms. Here, we're going to combine negative x squared and negative 4x squared. Right, so negative x squared minus 4x squared is equal to negative 5x squared. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to combine positive 3x and negative 5x, so 3x minus 5x. I'm just writing on the side so you see what I'm doing because it could be hard to find, but pretty much I'm matching up like terms. So 3x minus 5x is minus 2x, right? And here, finally, I have to pair up negative 7 and 2. So negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5, which is going to be answer choice 2. And I'll switch over to blue. Let me know which color you like the most, actually. I don't know. But number 7 says, if f of x is equal to x squared, which function is the result of shifting f of x 3 units to the left and 2 units down? Right, so whenever you want to shift something down, you subtract by that number, right? So if I want to shift this function 2 units down, I'm going to subtract by 2 after I squared my x. Cool. Right? Now, if I want to shift my function 3 units left, that means that I need to add 3 to x, right? So here, in order to add 3 to x squared, all I have to do is write x plus 3 squared minus 2. So when you're shifting something up or down, you're subtracting from f of x. When you're shifting something left to right, you're adding to x, right? So, I meant to erase that. So, for example, if I want to shift f of x 3 units down, I do f of x minus 2. And guess what? F of x is equal to x squared, so we just plug in x squared minus 2. Now, if I want to shift 3 units to the left, I need to alter my x. So I do f of x plus 3, right? And I can plug this in, or substitute for x, and that's just x plus 3 squared, right? So remember, left, right, x, up, down, f of x. That's how you do it, right? So we know that the answer to this is going to be 3 units to the left, so you add 3, so it's going to be choice number 3. Okay. So moving on to number 8, it says that an equation is used to find the velocity of an object is given as v squared is equal to u squared plus 2as, where u is the initial velocity, v is the final velocity, a is the acceleration of the object, and s is distance traveled. When this equation is solved for a, the result is what? Right, so you have the function v squared is equal to u squared plus 2as. Cool. And now they just ask you to solve for a. So isolate a, get a by itself. If I want to get a by itself, I want to move everything to one side except for a, right? So I'm going to subtract by u squared on both sides. So v squared minus u squared is equal to 2as. Now I have 2as on one side, so I'm going to just divide by 2a on both sides. And I get v squared minus u squared over 2a is equal to s. Sorry, not s. I'm going to divide by 2s to get rid of the s. So v squared minus u squared over 2s is equal to a. Why did I divide by 2s? Because I could just cancel it out if you divide by it, right? So a is equal to v squared minus u squared over 2s. Number 9 says, Mrs. Smith's math class surveyed students to determine their favorite flavor of soft ice cream. The results are shown in the table below. Of the students who preferred chocolate, approximately what percentage were senior? So here, when you're dealing with the percentages, you're calculating a part over a whole, right? So a part of something over the entire amount. So A good tell of what your whole is going to be is when you read the phrase of. So of blank means that whatever is in the blank is going to be your whole. So here is of the students who preferred chocolate. So the students who preferred chocolate is going to be my whole, right? So here, the people who preferred chocolate are in this box and this box only, so I'm going to focus on this box only. It's my whole is really going to be 42 plus 67, which is 109. That's my whole. Whenever you see of and here blank, so of the blank, the thing that's in the blank is your whole. So of people who prefer chocolate can be your whole. People who prefer chocolate is 42 over 67. Now, what percentage were senior? So what part? Percentage can also mean part. So what part of this 109 are seniors? Well, 67% of them, or 67 is the part over the whole, which is 109, right? In order to calculate percent, you need to multiply this by 100. It's part over whole times 100. So I could plug this into my calculator. 67 over 109 times 100, and I'll go fraction decimal. I get 61.46, which is close enough to 61.5. Moving on to number 10, it says f of x is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1, and g of x is equal to 3x plus 5. Then what is the total value of f of 1 minus g of 3? So they're asking you to evaluate these two functions at two specific points. It's asking you to evaluate f of x at x equals 1. Whenever you see f, that's an integral sign. Oh my goodness. It's calculus. Whenever you see f, I don't know why I'm drawing my f so weirdly. Whenever you see f of x or f of a specific number, right? That just means plug the number in for x. So for example, f of negative 1, or sorry, f of 1 just means plug x equals 1 into f of x. Okay, so we're going to do that, right? So f of 1 is really going to equal to plugging in x equals 1. So 1 squared plus 2 times 1 plus 1. So really just replace x with 1. That means that f of 1 is going to equal to 1 plus 2 plus 1, or f of 1 is going to equal to 4. Okay, so here you have 4 minus g of 3. And here we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to plug it into g of x, right? So g of 3 just means solve g of x, solve the equation of g when x is equal to 3. So that's 3 times 3 plus 5, which is 9 plus 5. So we know that g of 3 is equal to 14. So you have 4 minus 14, which is equal to negative 10, which is choice 3. Number 11 says which function has the largest y-intercept? So what is a y-intercept? A y-intercept is when the graph intercepts the y-axis. What does that mean? Okay, so intercept is kind of when you meet something or when you arrive at something. So the y-intercept is when the graph arrives at the y-axis, or when the graph touches the y-axis. So for example, if I have this point up here, which is negative, not negative, oh my god, which is just regular 4, and I have a graph that goes something like this and crosses through 4, this is my y-intercept because it touches the the y-axis at 4. It's the first time that the graph touches the y-axis, right? So any point at which the graph touches the y-axis is considered a y-intercept. Okay, so if we look over here in this graph, the first time that this graph or this curve touches the y-axis is going to be at the point y equals 1. Not y, yeah, y equals 1, right? So our y-intercept here is 1. Now, let's notice some other things at the y-intercept, right? This point 4, if I want to plot this out, really that's 0, 4, right? Because any point along the y-axis has an x value of 0. So the y-intercept occurs the y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. So that's another important piece of information. And that allows us to read this table right here. When x is equal to 0, h of x is equal to 2. So the y-intercept here is going to be 2. Why? Because we said that the y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. So when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 2. Okay, and we could do that, and we could solve for the y-intercept here. F of 0, so plug in 0 for x. Negative 4 times 0 is 0, and that's going to be negative 1. So the y-intercept here is negative 1. Here, let's do the same. The absolute value of 0 is 0, and 0 plus 3 is 3. So which one of these has the largest y-intercept? 1, 2, negative 1, or 3? The answer is 3, right? Because 3 is the largest out of those numbers. Moving on to number 12, it says that two texting plans are advertised. Plan A has a monthly fee of 15 with a charge of 0. Or with a charge of 8 cents per text. Plan B has a monthly fee of $3 with a charge of 12 cents per text. If T represents the number of text messages in a month, which inequality should be used to show that the cost of Plan A is less than the cost of Plan B? Okay, so let's write out Plan A and Plan B, right? Remember that when we talk about fees, there's no X value, and we talk about something that says per or rate. This has X value, so has X value. So here, the fee of $15, we're just going to add that to the 0.08 per text that we're going to multiply by X, right? Remember that per, rate, those mean the same thing. Those mean that an X goes after that number. So you see 0.08 per, replace this per with an X, so you have 0.088X. Okay, cool. So plan A is then going to be equal to what? So I'm going to write it out here. So A has to equal to 0.08x plus 15, and B is going to have to equal to 0.12x plus 3, right? Because there's a monthly fee. There's a fee, which means no x, of 3, and a charge of 12 cents per text. So you see per, replace it with an x. Okay, cool. So which inequality shows that the cost of plan A is less than the cost of plan B, right? So I need 0.08x plus 15 to be less than 0.12x plus 3. So I need this number to be bigger. Remember that the alligator sign, or the greater than or less than symbol, points to the number that's greater, right? So here 0.12x plus 3, which is plan B, is greater than plan A, which means that plan A has to be less than plan B, right? Plan B costs more than A. So which one of these represents that? It has to be choice number 1. Here they use t for x, but it doesn't really matter. Number 13 says the function f of x is graphed on a set of axes below, which is the equation of the axis of symmetry for f of x, right? So the axis of symmetry is going to split this up into a half, or it's going to make both sides equal to one another, right? And for a parabola, or something that looks like a smile or a frown, the axis of symmetry is going to pass through the vertex, right? Or it's going to pass through this tip, right? So here the axis of symmetry has to pass through this tip and split it in half into 2 equal halves. So this is going to be our axis of symmetry. Oh my goodness. My pen just completely freaked out. Oh, that sucks. So my axis of symmetry is going to be this flat line over here, or this vertical line over here, right? Because it splits it up into 2 equal halves. And this happens at x equals -1, which means that our answer choice is 1. X equals -1. Okay, moving on to 14, and if you're wondering why it's not y equals -1, if it was y equals -1, that would be a horizontal line. So when you have a y, there's going to be a horizontal line. Number 14 says, what is the degree of the polynomial 5x minus 3x squared minus 1 plus 7x cubed, right? So when you're talking about the degree of a polynomial, you're just talking about the number that it's raised to, or the biggest number that the function is raised to. So here we have 5x to the power of 1, 3x to the power of 2, and 7x to the power of 3. So here the function is being raised by 1, 2, and 3. Which one of these numbers is the biggest? 3, 7x cubed, right? This number is the biggest. That means it's a third degree polynomial. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 15. It says the product of x squared plus 3x plus 9 and x minus 3 is going to be what? Well, let's solve it out. When you say product, that means you have to multiply these two out. So let's multiply x squared plus 3x plus 9 by x minus 3. Or I'll write it in the opposite way because it seems a bit easier that way. X minus 3 times x squared plus 3x plus 9. So x times x squared is going to be x cubed, plus x times 3x is 3x squared, okay? Plus 9 times x is 9x, minus -3 times x squared is -3x squared, minus 9x, minus 27, right? And here combine like terms, x cubed, there's nothing else being cubed, so you can't combine it with anything else. 3x squared minus 3x squared is going to be 0, so these two terms cancel each other out. 9x minus 9x is, or 9x minus 9x, also going to equal to 0, so these two terms cancel out. So really you're going to have 3x minus 27, which is choice 1. Number 16 says the solution to 2/3, 3 minus 2x is equal to 3/4 is what? Okay, let's figure this out. So here we have 2 over 3 times 3 minus 2x is equal to 3 over 4. I can rewrite this as 2 times 3 minus 2x divided in total by 3. That's just a rule, right? This is really the same thing as saying 2 over 3 times 3 minus 2x over 1. So that's 2 times 3 minus 2x over 3. And this is equal to 3 over 4. Okay, now what I can do is I can cross multiply, right? To get rid of this fraction. So I need to cross multiply. So I multiply 3 by 3, which is 9. And I multiply this 2x minus 2 times 3 minus 2x by 4, which is going to be 8 times 3 minus 2x. Okay, now I just need to solve. So I'm going to distribute this 8 out. How did I get this 8? I just multiplied this 4 by this 2, which is legal. So 8 times 3 is 24, minus 2 times 8, which is negative 16. X is equal to 9. So here, I'm going to add 16 to both sides and subtract 9 from both sides. So I'm going to have 15 is equal to 16x, right? I added 16x to both sides, and I subtracted 9 from both sides. And if I have 15 is equal to 16x, divided by 16 on both sides, I get x is equal to 15 over 16, which is choice 4. Moving on to 17, it says if f of x is equal to 2x plus 6 and g of x is equal to the absolute value of x, if they're graphed on the same coordinate plane, for which values of x is f of x equal to g of x, right? Whenever you see f of x equal to g of x, you're just thinking of an intersection. So at what point do the two graphs touch? What point does f of x and g of x touch? This happens at what point? Well, let's figure it out. F of x is equal to 2x plus 6 and g of x is equal to radical x. So let's graph this on your calculator, right? So I'm going to graph f of x. So I'm just going to type in 2x plus 6. And in order to graph the absolute value of x, I go into math. I press the right arrow key to number. Where it says ABS, I press enter and I get the absolute value symbol, and that's just absolute value of x. So if I graph this, we see that they intersect at this point right here. The two graphs touch. And here, f of x is equal to g of x. And this point is going to be somewhere negative. It's going to be at negative 2 because at negative 2, f of x is equal to 2 and g of x is also equal to 2. So it's going to be the point negative 2. Okay, so moving on to number 18, it says, what is the solution to the inequality 2x minus 7 is greater than 2.5x plus 3? So let's solve it, right? 2x minus 7 is greater than 2.5x plus 3. Okay, cool. So let's just combine our like terms. So let's subtract 2.5x from both sides. So here I have 2x minus 2.5x, which is going to be negative 0.5x. And now I'm going to add 7 on both sides. So I have negative 0.5x is greater than 10. And I'm going to divide by negative 0.5 on both sides. And because I'm dividing by a negative number, this inequality has to shift, right? It has to flip directions. So now x has to be less than 10 divided by negative 0.5, which is negative 20. So it has to be choice number 4. So all I did here was I combined like terms. I moved this 2.5x to this side, and I did that by doing 2x minus 2.5x. And then I moved this 7 from this side to this side by adding 7. And then I just divided by 0.5, by negative 0.5. And because I divided by negative 0.5, or a negative number, I had to change the direction in which this sign faces. Cool. So number 19 says three expressions are written below. Which expressions are equivalent to 8x to the third times y to the sixth? Okay, cool. So when you just need to remember your exponent rules or exponential rules for this thing, right? So whenever you have a set of numbers raised to the third, that's the same thing as saying all of them are now raised to the third, right? It's the same thing as multiplying the number that they're raised by the number that they're being raised to, right? So 2xy squared is really going to equal to 8x cubed y to the sixth, right? So that means that answer choice A has to be one of the correct answers. Next, what they're saying down here is when you multiply 2x cubed by 6y, you get 8x cubed times 6y. Let's see that. Well, let's apply that same rule. Whenever you have numbers, in this case 2 numbers, raised to a power, right, you're going to do a cubed b cubed. That's going to equal to this. So here, 2x cubed is going to be equal to 2 cubed times x cubed, or 8x cubed. So here you have 8x cubed times y to the 6th. So this also works. And finally, we need to test out c, which instead of anything being raised to the power, you're just multiplying something out. So let's multiply it out. Here you have 2x squared y squared times 4xy cubed, right? And I'm not doing anything to this 4xy cubed because this is inside of the parentheses, right? This is not outside of the parentheses. So 2x squared times 4x is going to be 8x to the power of 6, no, to the power of 3, right? Then y, and then you're going to then multiply this by y cubed, right? And then you're then going to expand this over to y squared times 4x, which is going to be y 4xy squared. And this is when we start running into issues because 4xy squared, this is no longer looking like 8x to and times 6y. So choice C is incorrect. So that's to be choices A and B. If you're confused on this and you don't know exponential rules, what you could have also done was just plug in numbers. You could have said that A is equal to 2. Oh, not A, sorry. You can say that X is equal to 2 and Y is equal to 3 and just plug them in to your calculator and see which one of these matches that choice. So if you plug in Y is equal to 2 and X equal to 3 here and it gives you like the number 15, you just see which one of these is also equal to 15. So number 20 says, Joe deposits 4,000 into a certificate of deposit at his local bank. The CD, which is a certificate of deposit, earns 3% interest compounded annually. What is the value of X of the CD in X years? Right, so you're trying to find the function that tells you that. So if he deposits 4,000 originally, 1 and 2 are going to be off, right? Because if you earn interest, you need to put it into the interest formula. The interest formula is equal to P is equal to A times 1 plus minus R to the power of N, or T, right? So A is the amount that you invest initially, R is the interest rate, and N is the amount of time, right? So if you earn 3% interest, that means that you are adding 1 plus 0.03, which is equal to 3%, right? So if something earns interest and appreciates, your rate is going to be positive and you're going to add that to 1. If something loses interest and depreciates, that means that you're going to subtract 0.3. Here you're earning it, so you're adding 0.3. 1 plus 0.3 is 1.03, right? And your initial amount, the amount that you initially had, which is the amount that you deposit, is going to be 4,000. And then it's going to be raised to the power of x. So 20 is 4. 21 says, when factored completely, negative x cubed plus 10x squared plus 24x is equal to what? Well, the first thing I need to do here is I need to factor it out, right? What do all of these terms have in common? 10x cubed. Sorry, negative x cubed, 10x squared, 24x. All of these have an x in one of their terms, right? So we can factor that out, right? We can divide everything by x. So if we divide everything by x, we get negative x squared plus 10x plus 24, right? And now, because this is x squared, I can use FOIL, right? And I could FOIL it out. So here, what is this equal to, right? What two numbers multiply into 24 but add up into 10? It could be 12 and negative 2. 12 times negative 2 is negative 24, but 12 plus negative 2 is equal to 10, right? So we can factor this out in terms of 12 and 10. So I can rewrite this as x times negative x squared minus 2x plus 10x plus 24. Sorry, or plus 12x. Oops. Plus negative 2x plus 12x plus 24, right? And then I can factor out x. So I'm going to write my work down here. X times negative x times x plus 2. And here I can factor out 12, right? So x plus 2. And I'm left with x times x plus 2, x minus 12. Right? And this is going to represent answer choice number 3. Right? So all we did here was in order to FOIL something, you need to have it in terms of x squared. Here we had it in terms of x cubed. We fixed this by dividing everything by x because each one of these terms had an x in it, which means that we could take out x legally. Once we took out x and we had x squared, we just used FOIL, right? We found that 12 times negative 2 adds up to 10. and multiplies into negative 24, so we use that to factor it out further. Number 12 says when the temperature is 59 degrees Fahrenheit, the speed of sound at sea level is 1,225 kilometers per hour. Which process could be used to convert this speed into feet per second? So whenever you're looking at a long chain of fractions like this, you don't need to figure anything out other than the end units, right? Here you want to convert this speed into feet per seconds. So you want to have feet on top and seconds on bottom, which means that each one of these units needs to cancel out to have feet on top and seconds on bottom. So let's see. Here you have kilometers on top, kilometers on bottom. These two cancel out. Then you have miles on top, right? But then, oh, here you have hours on bottom and hours on bottom. So those two cancel. And you have minutes on bottom, minutes on top. That cancels, right? So in the end, on the bottom, you're left with seconds, which is what we need. Now we need feet on the top. But here you have miles times miles. So on the top of your function, you have miles squared divided by feet second. This is not feet per second, right? So this is not correct. Here, let's see, kilometers on top, kilometers on bottom. Those two cancel out. Then miles on top, miles on bottom. Those two cancel. If you have something on the top and the bottom, you can cancel them out, right? Or cross them out. So next, we have feet on top and no feet on bottom. So feet stays. And now you have hour on bottom, hour on top, right? That cancels out. You have minute on bottom, minute on top. That cancels out. And look, the only two units that did not cancel out are feet and second. And we wanted feet over second, feet per second. When you have something per something, it's a fraction, right? And which means that choice 2 is correct. Number 23 says the zeros of a polynomial function are -2, 4, and 0. What are the factors of this function, right? So when you have zeros, that means that f of x is equal to 0 at that point. So for example, -2 makes the entire function equal to 0, right? So my function really just could be x minus x plus 2, right? Because when I plug in f of -2, you have -2 plus 2, which is equal to 0. It makes the function equal to 0. So that means that x plus 2 has to be a part of this function. Same thing with x minus 4 and x, right? Because when you make x 0, guess what? You can pretty much express a function in terms of its zeros, right? Here we know all of its zeros, so we need to make sure, or we need to write little scenarios that make these zeros true. In order to make -2 true, you need to do x plus 2, because when you plug in -2 plus 2 is 0. We need to make 4 true because x minus 4, when you plug in 4 into x minus 4, 4 minus 4 is 0. And then we could just write x. When you plug in 0 for x, x is equal to 0. And then when you combine all of these together, you combine them by multiplying them together, and you get the polynomial function. Cool. Which means that it's divided by these numbers right here, which is going to be choice 3. So that's all you needed to do here. Number 24 says, what is the range of the function x minus 4 squared plus 1? Right, so when you're talking about range, you're looking at the y output. So we're limiting choices 1 and 2 because those are talking about x. F of x is just a fancy way of writing y. F of x and y are pretty much the same, right? They represent the same thing. They represent a y value, or the y coordinate on a function, right? So the range is just by how much the y value varies, right? Or the entire y value. So if we want to find the range, why don't we just graph it and look at it, right? So for ourselves, right? So here we have what? We have x minus 4 squared plus 1. So x minus 4 squared plus 1. Let's see what happens. We can see that the y goes into infinity, but it starts at 1. So that means that f of x has to be greater than or equal to 1. That's all that means. Because you start at 1 and you go all the way up. That's number 24. That's all of part 1 completed. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I really hope you learned something from this video. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe.